Hey folks, this is Kelani. Well, they've gone and done it. The war campaign is over. The battle for Azeroth is over. At least in the sense of a faction conflict at any rate. We'll have to wait a bit longer to see if the battle for Azeroth continues with our best buddy from below the waves, N'Zoth, but for now it looks like we might see a very different World of Warcraft going forward. Let's have a chat about the end of the war campaign, what happened, what's important, and ultimately, what does this mean for the future of WoW? So, obviously, spoilers ahead. If you haven't played through the war campaign yet or haven't looked up the cinematics on YouTube, go ahead and do that first. You'll want to see them for yourself before you hear any of this malarkey. The war campaign final chapter is only about 20 minutes long. There isn't that much to do. You pick up a few quests, listen to a few bits of story, and watch 2 cinematics. The cinematics themselves are about 10 minutes of the fun, so you should be well entertained for at least half of your time spent playing through this section of patch 825. The war campaign culminates in a siege of Orgrimmar. Both Saurfang's rebellion and the Alliance are outside the gates of Orgrimmar, and by the sounds of things, the rebellion didn't manage to get all that large, and the Alliance weren't able to muster their entire force. One last strike, Anduin says. That's all we have. The most interesting takeaway from this specific cinematic is that the dev team seems to be breaking down the faction barrier a lot more. Saurfang talks about how the Horde was birthed in blood, and a peaceful Horde isn't really on the table. Anduin reminds him that the Alliance isn't exactly the vision of perfection, and they have a little bonding moment. But the real key here is that we might finally be in a place where the Horde and the Alliance don't immediately go back to fighting after this war is over. We have Anduin and Jaina really wanting to make this happen on the Alliance side, and the whole rebellion on the Horde side wants to do away with another warmongering war chief. It's not a stretch to think they would be more interested in peace when all is said and done. The leaders are talking about it. Might be a possibility. If they can get rid of Sylvanas, they might have a shot at some semblance of peace in the near future, especially when they're well aware of the looming threat posed by the freed old god. But I have a feeling that the dev team might take this one step further and really start breaking down the faction barrier for gameplay purposes as well as the story. Can you imagine grouping up across both factions, raiding and running dungeons, questing and adventuring, being able to talk to each other? It's insane, I know, especially the talking part. The days of Keck and Burr will finally be behind us. I think this is going to be one of the main headlines for BlizzCon 2019 for World of Warcraft. The Alliance and the Horde are finally working together properly, which includes huge changes to how the game plays as a whole. There are already some hints of it sprinkled here and there, like the addition of the Horde and Alliance symbol on your login screen for each character. Do you really need that marker unless something weird is going to happen which blurs the lines between the two factions? Maybe, maybe not, but back to the war campaign finale. The battle was fierce. The gates of Orgrimmar came crashing down. Practically everyone died. If that's the kind of ending you are hoping for, I am going to have to disappoint you. This campaign was settled with a mock Gorah. I feel like this may have happened before, at least a few times. This also ends much in the same way, but I do think it worked out pretty well this time. Saurfang wanted to save as many lives as he could. He knew that Horde were on both sides of this conflict, and if the battle started properly, then the Horde would lose countless lives either way. Champion versus champion to decide the outcome of an entire war isn't really anything new, but I guess it does feel a bit lazy when we've been building up to this massive confrontation, and then everyone goes home. Well, except Saurfang and Sylvanas. They duke it out for a little bit. Sylvanas toys with Saurfang until he gives her a quick lecture on how she'll never destroy hope. Even if she burns down a world tree, hope shall remain. Even if she pits the Horde against the Alliance again and again, hope shall remain. The denizens of Azeroth still cling to hope, to life, and to the promise of peace. And that goes against everything Sylvanas has been working for. Something really cool happens then. Saurfang splits Charlemagne, which I didn't think anyone but Varian was capable of doing, but it makes for an awesome 1-2 combo that catches the Banshee Queen off guard. A nice little slice through the eye causes her to lose her nerve.
You are all nothing!
and that's all Saurfang needed. He knows it as well. That cheeky little smirk tells you a whole story. No matter what happens, he's already won. The Horde confidence in the Banshee Queen will falter and they'll find a new leader. I guess Sylvanas probably realizes this too, because she makes off like a Death Eater, but not before unleashing some devastating magic upon Saurfang. We've never seen her use these powers before, as Lothramar reminds us several times afterwards, but I guess Sylvanas decided it was time to cut her losses and move on. Now this leaves us in an interesting spot. The Horde is currently leaderless, and the two factions look like they're heading towards peace once again. You can find different conversations dotted around that deal with the aftermath of Sylvanas and her loyal followers. Some of the previous fanbase try to use the auction house or the bank and are denied, before one of our faction leaders pops by to see what all the commotion is about and remind everybody that Sylvanas is evil, she conned a lot of people into following her, and we should all try to get along from now on. So that's kind of where we are after the events in this patch. We'll either go into patch 8.3, which could be Void related, or we might even hop straight into the next expansion. BlizzCon will most likely be the next time we really see any more news. They will probably keep everything under wraps, kind of like they did with patch 8.2.5, and give us a really big reveal in November. So kick back and relax. We probably won't have much to do in BFA for quite a while, but at least Classic still gives us something to do for the time being. With Sylvanas hightailing it out of there, what does that mean for her future? A lot of people were speculating that she would either die sometime this expansion, or reveal her true plans and end up being redeemed in some way. The main reason for those explanations was the whole Sylvanas isn't Garrosh 2.0 thing that Blizzard kept promising. So if we don't defeat her in a raid and have her escape later, like what happened with Garrosh, what else can happen with the current story? She could be working in everyone's favour, trying to defeat the Void and whatnot. I guess that could still be true, though she definitely isn't on our side from this point onwards. Or the other major turn of events could be the death of the War Chief. Instead of any of that, she hightails it out of there with her new smoke machine, and we're left to wonder when we'll face off against her in the future. I've got to say, that does feel a little bit like Garrosh 2.0. For those of you who decided to stay loyal to Sylvanas throughout this entire adventure, you actually get a bit of a sneak peek at her future plans. You can find her at the Windrunner Sanctuary, where you'll have a loyalist-only cutscene. If you love Saurfang and didn't want to betray the true values of the Horde, you won't be able to see this cutscene at all unless you do the war campaign on a different character and pick the correct choices, or loyalist choices if you want this cutscene. It turns out those choices do have consequences. This cutscene gives us a few pieces of vital information. Sylvanas says that it doesn't matter that Saurfang cut the war short. Countless souls have been fed to the hungering darkness. She mocks how we cling to hope and to life, and that we will learn the truth along with the rest. Her bargain with Azshara will yet bear fruit. The armies of Azeroth will fight her master, and he will line their streets with corpses. In the end, he too will serve death. Nothing lasts. When you see me next, you will understand. That confirms that Sylvanas does have greater plans in mind, and she's seemingly serving some greater darkness, and we will apparently definitely see her again. This hungering darkness that she has fed countless souls, is that something worse than the Void? We know the Void and Undeath are two sides of a really bad coin. They oppose each other like oil and water, but it's not quite like the Light and the Void, where one is kind of mostly good and the other is kind of mostly bad. Both Undeath and the Void are on the bad side, the evil side, shall we say, so maybe we won't be facing off against the Void just yet. Maybe we chase Sylvanas to her new master and take on the forces of Undeath first. It gives us, and more importantly Blizzard, a few ideas to play around with to make sure we still have some enemies to fight if the Horde and the Alliance start working together again, and don't go back to war the next time someone flicks an ear. Sylvanas having a hungry boss to feed also explains why she went to such lengths to start this war in the first place. Nothing piles up bodies and corpses like a good old-fashioned war. All of the Night Elves who fell defending Darkshore as the Horde trampled through, all of the lives lost when the World Tree burned to ash, the countless slain in the battle for the Undercity. When the last seal of G'huun broke, I'm pretty sure plenty of people died in the siege of Dazar Alor. When the Alliance came back to knock down the doors to try and assassinate King Rastakhan, More deaths. Sylvanas baited both the Horde and the Alliance out into the sea so Azshara would decimated both their forces. Every turn has upped the body count, and now we know why. It wasn't for the Horde, it wasn't to destroy the Alliance. All Sylvanas wanted was to feed as many of us as she could to this hungering darkness. I guess the next part of the story will try to explain why. Her bargain with Azshara is also something to look into. Obviously, Sylvanas knew that Azshara would pull everyone down into Nazjatar if she sent us out into the water, but for what purpose? What did either of these two characters stand to benefit from sending us to Nazjatar? Well, Azshara actually needed our help to free N'Zoth. The only artifact powerful enough to destroy the remaining seals on N'Zoth's prison was our Heart of Azeroth, freshly filled to the brim with Azeroth's Titan blood and various Titan essences. Thanks to Sylvanas, we delivered that right to her doorstep. Sure, she kind of died during the whole ordeal, but that didn't seem to be all too permanent. What about Sylvie? Her body count probably rose quite considerably during the entire story arc. Deaths from the initial parting of the seas, deaths from the dangers of the zone itself, deaths from assaulting Azshara's palace. Deaths everywhere. The bargain seems simple. Deliver the Heart of Azeroth and its bearer to the right spot, and Azshara will kill lots of people for Sylvanas' hungry overlord. Apparently, the deal hasn't bore enough fruit for Sylvanas to be satisfied just yet, though. But the next part about Azeroth's armies sparking a war against N'Zoth, that's probably the key here. N'Zoth will lay waste to our forces, and in doing so he will feed even more souls to the hungering dark. N'Zoth will be handing his true enemy, the mysterious forces of Undeath, more and more power with every life he takes on Azeroth. It's going to be like an all-you-can-eat buffet, and we're the lunch special. He too will serve death. So from what I can tell, we'll probably take the fight to N'Zoth next. We'll either defeat him and move on to the Undeath stuff after that, or N'Zoth might try to strike a deal with us and we'll get some cool new void powers as we delve into the Shadowlands. That might seem a bit far-fetched, but honestly I think we're going to need all the help we can get. The powers that Sylvanas have now are pretty crazy. It looks like she might have learned a few things in exchange for all of those souls. The blast she hits Saurfang with and her new ability to just poof up and away totally looks like Undeath or Death magic. She sapped all of the life from Saurfang in a single kaboom. Her power is also a focal point for NPCs after the battle. Jaina, Lothramar and Thalyssra discuss what they saw and try to figure out where she obtained such devastating abilities and why no one knew about them before this. They can't figure it out, even what kind of magic it was, but Lothramar does say something interesting. Either way, it does not bode well for us. Whatever she is planning, she no longer needs the Horde to achieve it. From what little we know about Sylvanas' goals, she's been trying to stay alive ever since the incident atop Icecrown Citadel. She doesn't want to die, that's why she enlisted the Valkyr so they could resurrect her if needed. She wanted to create more Valkyr by enslaving Ea so she could be resurrected as often as needed. She tried to raise more Forsaken to bolster her shield of walking corpses, and when she gained the mantle of War Chief she had the entire Horde at her disposal. Killing Sylvanas would have been very difficult while she maintained that title, but if she doesn't need the Horde anymore, if she doesn't need her meat shield or her Valkyr, does that mean she's finally mastered death? Can she avoid that spiraling torment forevermore? Either she figured something very important out, or she just made a deal with the right person for once. She tried making deals in the past with Helya, that didn't work out too well. She obviously made some deal with Azshara, but finally she found someone who can give her what she wants. Immortality. She no longer needs protection, which is why she abandoned the Horde after letting slip that she actually just doesn't care for anyone. No one was going to follow her after that, but it doesn't really matter. She bought all the time she needed and she handed over all the souls that were required, so her plans must be well on track. I'm sure we'll throw a wrench in those plans in an expansion or two's time though, so we'll just have to wait until we see her again. I am a little sad that we will probably have to wait until November to see what comes next, but that wait will also make this BlizzCon one of the best we've had in a very long time. No matter who you ask, the answer is always the same. This BlizzCon is going to be the biggest and the best they've had in a really long time. So much information, so many new games, it's going to be a blast for sure. We'll find out where we go next in WoW, whether that's into a patch 8.3 to really brood over the betrayal of Sylvanas, or straight into a new expansion to take the fight to the next bad already on our list. We also should get a pretty good idea of where World of Warcraft will be heading for the majority of next year. We'll find out what the next expansion is, even if we do have a patch 8.3, and they'll probably have some more info about classic World of Warcraft as well. BFA has just been set up to move forward in so many different directions, so I'm super stoked to see where the dev team sends us next. One thing that I am certain of right now though is that the factions will be broken down in some capacity going forward. I think having both the Horde and the Alliance as totally separate player bases is hurting the live version of the game quite a bit, and I think that's something they really need to address at this stage of the story too. But that's all I wanted to talk about regarding the end of the war campaign, what the key events were, how they might affect the future of the game, and what might come next. What do you think about the ending of the war campaign? Are you satisfied with the resolution, or do you think they should have done something differently? Do you think the dev team will dissolve the faction barrier entirely, or do you think the game just wouldn't be the same if you could group up and do everything and anything together, regardless of which faction you were a part of? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join the other guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.